in the beginning, sort of identifying the issue. I'm going to come up and I'm going to start the Q&A because I know there's some questions that everybody's going to ask, so I may as well ask them of Clif to begin with. And then we'll get to your questions and we'll conclude for the evening when they're sort of wound down and done. Again, I just want to give a little bit of time for some of the people coming in. I'd say we're going to give 5 more minutes. At 6:45, we'll start instead of 6:30. There are some sheets that are being handed out. Frank, have you gotten the tsunami of opportunity? Great. This is a piece. The tsunami of opportunity is a piece that I've written, and it sort of counters. A few years ago, the United Methodist Church did a piece called The Death Tsunami, and it talked about the graying of our churches and the problems. This is the tsunami of opportunity. This is really a counter to that and an opportunity for you to look at. I know what it says. 10,000 people today was their last day of work in America. That will not end for a very long time to come. The baby boom generation is reaching retirement age. Isn't that great? You should give a round of applause to the retirees. So today, if you were going into Hallmark, you would have bought 10,000 retirement cards. Hallmark knows that. If you go to the retirement card section of Hallmark, they've got a whole bunch of cards now. Congratulations on your retirement. And they're not going to stop that for the next 15 years. 10,000 people a day. According to a recent survey in USA Today, you'll see the footnote there, 40% of people getting ready to retire, 40% of the people said what they want to do in their retirement is volunteer. They want to volunteer. How many of you have an opportunity to volunteer for anything in your church? Show of hands. Okay, there's 5 that don't. My guess is after tonight, you'll learn the importance of having volunteers in your church. We can't do it all with paid staff. We can't fulfill the mission of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world unless we have volunteers doing that. And here's the good news. 40% want to help you do that, of the retirees. That's 4,000 people today became volunteers. Amazing number, right? Amazing number. Lots of hope in that number. Here's what's really important about that number. How many people have ever had a volunteer in your church, your food pantry, your college or university that ever left a gift in their will because they volunteered for the organization throughout their retirement? Anybody? Show of hands. I just received a $1 million gift from somebody that was a God-fearing, God-loving volunteer in one of our United Methodist churches. It happens. Does it happen because they thought about it or because they were asked through a planned giving program? We're going to talk a little bit about planned gifts and the importance of planned gifts, particularly with people whose passion is to volunteer in our church. Do you see where I'm going with this case? 10,000 people a day, 4,000 become volunteers. The United Methodist Church wants volunteers, and now it helps fund our mission and our ministry because people that are involved with that become our most generous volunteers as well as supporters in time, talent, and yes, treasure. That's what you're going to talk about tonight as we get into the conversation piece. But first, we're going to talk about the problems in the United Methodist Church, the realities that are facing us. We all know this stuff. It's just laying the groundwork. The great thing is most of it can be responded to, but it has to start with an annual conference. Now let's talk about an annual conference. What's the theme of this year's annual conference? Everybody at one time? Stewardship. Oh, that's so odd to me. Well, I think the Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation says a little word about stewardship. What's the first word under Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation? Stewardship, yes, and investment services. Our wheel of life is because we invest for your churches, we're able to provide a lot of free stewardship resources to your church. The first free resource is on the sheet that you got, the Death Tsunami or the Tsunami of Opportunity. What does it say on the Tsunami of Opportunity? Stewardship Resources, www.maumflegacy.org. Please click there and visit there and sign up for a newsletter. That will start you in your plan giving journey in helping others in your church plan a gift there. We provide that resource at no cost to your church. You can plan a charitable gift annuity. You can plan a gift in a will. There's videos. There's things up there for you. That's the first resource I'm giving you tonight for zero. So let's get to some information, but first, a word of prayer from our bishop. Bishop Peggy Johnson, ladies and gentlemen.
It's good to see everybody. Thanks for coming. I just couldn't imagine who would come and look at all these folks here. I know you'll be blessed tonight from the wonderful things you're going to learn and be able to take back to your church and resource lots of people with this. So let's bow for a word of prayer. Gracious God, we thank you for gathering us here in safety and comfort in this place where we know lots of good things are going to happen this weekend. And Lord, this is just the first moment, and we're pleased to have this opportunity. So Lord, open our hearts to ways that we can do better with our church stewardship and with the stewardship of our very lives as we serve you more and more like Jesus. So Lord, we pray your blessings now in this time. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Bishop. I'm going to now bring up our guest speaker, Dr. Reverend Clif Christopher. It's actually Reverend Doctor. Can somebody please correct me on that? What, Frank? We will do that. There you go. Okay, yes, Frank, the Associate Director. Stand up, Frank. Frank gets no love. He's the Associate Director of the Mid-Atlantic United Methodist Foundation. You don't see him a lot in Eastern Penn because we've got him hidden down in the Baltimore, Washington conference office. So he is from the BWC conference down there in the office. He does all of our investment work, and if you're investing through us, you'll hear a lot from Frank in the coming months. If you want tonight's slides, and you feel they'll be helpful for your church, we will email tonight's slides to you and send you the program. We will go so far as to email other slides as well and things that we think would help your church, but we do it by email. And so we're going to need you to sign up for that. Frank will pass around the sign-up sheet. I may as well do this all at one time. Kent Kraler, stand up, please. Kent Kraler, the Mid-Atlantic Foundation, our stewardship committee is chaired by Kent Kraler. A lot of these programs that you see come from the budget of the Mid-Atlantic Foundation run through the stewardship committee. We seek programs that are needed in your churches. So if there's things that you want to learn about, things that you really need about, we'll talk a little bit more about the programs that we're going to be offering in the coming year. And Kent chairs that committee, which is a very, very active committee of the foundation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, let's bring up Clif Christopher. There you go. I mean, he came in from Arkansas today, folks. That's not an easy journey.
It's not that hard.
Nope. Reverend Dr. Clif Christopher is the top-selling stewardship author in America today. He's got 3 and now a 4th book out that were very, very popular bestsellers. Many of you, show of hands here, how many people have you read Not Your Parents' Offering Plate? Right? That laid the groundwork about the shift in giving in America and in our churches. Whose offering plate is it? How many of you have read Whose Offering Plate Is It? Answering the question, if we give, whose offering plate is that? How many of you have read Rich Church, Poor Church? Rich Church, Poor Church. What good rich churches do? Listen, this has nothing to do with dollars. It has rich of wealth and other things within the congregation, right?
Well, it has to do with dollars for me if they buy the book.
There you go. All right. There you go. Well, we want to make sure we sell some books then. And Rich Church, Poor Church, and the Church Money Manual. All of these things are centered around stewardship. I can't think of a better speaker. We have had him speak now 9 times in the last 3 years. We've had him at our academy, our Financial Leadership Academy. He spent time with our clergy scholars for 2 days recently in April. And he has a great wealth of wisdom, but it's only good until we get it into your hands and get your questions answered. So, Dr. Reverend Clif Christopher. Reverend Doctor.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it very much. I didn't know it was 9, but I knew it was a bunch. And I know the bishop said she was so pleased that this many came out. Frankly, I'm stunned. You know, I told Jack, I said, they've heard me too often, too much. Surely I've, worn them out, and they don't want to come back for me, get somebody's more exciting. But I don't think I'm cheaper than everybody, but for some reason you have continued to ask. And I do really appreciate it. I really want you to hear from me what a gift you have in your Mid-Atlantic Foundation. I work with foundation directors and Methodist foundations all over the United States and know all of them. And your foundation is one of the finest that we have. And the way they invest in trying to serve the church is rare and is a blessing to you. All foundations do not do that as readily and freely as Mid-Atlantic does. All the foundations take money and invest it for whoever the investor is and return it in the way they've been told to return it. Mid-Atlantic has a lot of money that has been given to it to use as they choose. It's their choice. Annual conference doesn't control it. They do. And they choose to return that back in various programs and stewardship and aid, the academy, the leadership academy that they're doing right now in other ways. And most foundations aren't doing it like that. And Jack, we thank you, Frank, and the others of your foundation. You got a good one. I want you to know just a little bit of where I come from before I hit a few of these slides. And Jack had said to me, we want to have a Q&A night. And I said, yeah, that's great. I'll just come sit on a bar stool and answer questions. And then about 2 days ago, he said, well, we kind of want you to talk first, and then we'll do that. So we've got a handful of slides that we actually used at the academy that we will be sharing with you. But mostly I want you to ask questions, so I want to know what your agenda is and see if I can help you. I was born a United Methodist. I was baptized at 6 weeks of age in the First United Methodist Church of Conway, Arkansas. I was confirmed in the United Methodist Church. I chose to enter ministry in the United Methodist Church. Was ordained at the altar of a United Methodist Church. And someday a United Methodist preacher will toss the dust upon my casket. I love the United Methodist Church. I grieve for it too. I hurt when I see statistics that say we used to have this many and now we have this many, because those are persons that somehow we lost, and they are not getting the joy and the blessing that I have had all my life. And we're burying more than we're bringing in. I grieve, and I don't want to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. That's what drives me every day. Horizon Stewardship was founded by me in 1992. We now have 25 persons who work worldwide. General Board of Higher Ed has hired us to teach stewardship in all Methodist institutions around the world, Asia and Africa and South America and Europe and wherever, and we're thrilled to do that, delighted to do it. In the process of working with churches, we've raised well over $2 billion. $2 billion, most of that in United Methodist churches. though we don't restrict our work to just Methodists, but we're pretty darn Methodist since I'm still under appointment. Bishop called me today about something I just double-checked. You are going to call my name for 1 more year. And that's it. He didn't have to call it anymore. Just give me 1 more. That'll make 40. I'm good. I'm done. I'll join the 10,000 next year. In that time frame, where we have put well over $2 billion into ministry of the church, the percentage of Christians in America has gone down. The United Methodist Church has continued to get smaller. There are less people in worship. And young people seem to be turning their backs on us in droves, according to the recent Pew report that came out. And I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that somehow $2 billion couldn't be more part of the solution. I don't have all the answers, obviously, or I would have answered them, myself. And if we're going to turn this problem around, it's really not going to be because of what folks like me do. It's going to be because of what folks like you do, the ones of you who mount pulpits every Sunday and who lead local churches. And my only hope in tonight, tomorrow night, is potentially I'll give you a little bit of something that you can take back into that battlefield of the local church and will be able to win more people for this Jesus Christ that I love and the United Methodist Church that I love. So, let's talk about stuff. See if these slides work. Well, that didn't work. That was the wrong one. Aha! Now we're good. United Methodist in the United States lost 93,000 members in 2013. That's a 256-member church every day. Every day. Only 4 of our annual conferences grew: Texas, North Carolina, North Georgia, and Tennessee. The biggest loser was the Western jurisdiction. They now have less members in the entire Western jurisdiction than the North Georgia Conference. That is a huge geographical chunk of America in the Western jurisdiction. Worship decline was 2.1% in 2013. The largest drop was in the Northeast jurisdiction. The Western jurisdiction was right behind it. United Methodists now give 1% of their income to the church. Doesn't that sound terrible? We give 1/10 of a tenth. 1%. But you know what's kind of exciting to me about that? If we Methodists could just grow to 2%, that would double. That would double the amount of money that we have for mission and ministry. And all we got to do is get to 2%. So, why is this happening? I've got a few answers, some things that I have seen. One of the things I see is that we too often subordinate our mission for money. We get off track too often from what our mission is supposed to be because somebody says that may cost us money. If we go down that track, that may cost us money. We fold too quickly to the cry, if you do that, my money and I may leave. We've lost the sense of being mission-centered. When I was in the Army, we all learned the Army ethos of which the very first line, there are 4 bullet points of what it is to be a soldier, and the first one was, I'll always put the mission first. We'll always put the mission first. Seems to me that ought to be the ethos of our churches. I'll always put the mission first. Not making sure I have enough money, not ensuring that I balance a budget. I'll always put the mission first. It truly angered me about, it's been several months back. It was near the end of last year. I was visiting in a Methodist church. Was out on the road as I am quite often. Sunday came and I went to a Methodist church. And praise Jesus, the preacher got up and opened the service by saying that we now have a word from John Smith, the chair of finance, who wants to address the congregation. And I thought, thank God I woke up this morning to go to a finance committee meeting. That was our call to worship, was this finance fella walking out and the preacher sitting down and yielding the time for a finance report. And this guy started and he said, this will be the last time you'll have to hear from me this year, because we have now balanced the budget. And you could hear applause. And I'm here to thank our pastor and staff who have cut back on programming, determined not to hire staff, and reduce the church's mission and ministry to where we can balance our budget. And I will promise you it will be balanced next year and the next, and as long as I'm the finance chairman. I wanted you all to hear the good news, and they applauded. And he walked off. The applause because we have cut mission and ministry. But we balanced the budget. And after all, that's what it's all about. I think it is when that sort of thing is seen by the world outside that they begin to wonder, what good are you anyway? What good are you? What do you exist for? Well, to balance the budget. Never ever subordinate your mission for money. Never. And yet in church after church after church that we go into, one of the things we do is what we call a stewardship discovery. And we go do like an intensive care work with local churches that bishops and cabinets have asked us to do. And we'll go in and do like 10 in a conference, etc. And one of the things we ask lay leaders of that church when we go in, and in a one-on-one meeting where there's no group, but just with that lay person, I always ask, can you share with me what the mission of your church is? And I get, well, I remember what it was when Brother Harold was pastor here. But what is it now? We do have one. And the next person, well, what is it? I'll tell you what I think it ought to be. Or the next one is, well. And generally, I don't get the same answer twice. There is no general sense of we gather in this place for this primary purpose. This is our mission. This is the mission. Lots of little pieces to it, but ultimately they all lead to this. Now that seems to make some semblance of sense for any organization, doesn't it? And yet in most of our churches, our workers, leaders, people cannot share with any kind of uniformity exactly what that mission is. If you don't know the mission, then how are you able to judge whether you were successful or not? And what is it exactly that you're asking me to give to? What's the ultimate aim of what we are about? I'm trying to change the slide. Well, okay, they're yelling at me back there now. Have I made you mad? Okay, anybody know a good song? Hope this doesn't happen to you tomorrow, Bishop. This is yeah, we're practicing all this out so it won't happen to you. One, two, three, four. Oh, we went back to the start. Okay, that's all right. This doesn't make me very happy. We don't need to look at this again. Aha! Yay! Secondly, leaders won't or don't know how to lead. Now, I'm sure that Bishop Johnson is going to read the names of a number of pastors who are going to go to brand new churches this year. And there will be some push and pull with every one of them. Oh, the first Sunday, everybody's going to say, nice to meet you. And then the second week, it's going to be, preacher, I need to talk to you about something that I want. And somebody else of what I want. And it begins the push and the pull, and where do we go? I talked with one new pastor this past year who had just gotten there, and I said, what is your vision? And he said, I'm waiting for them to tell me. I'm waiting for them to tell me. You know, that would have been a neat way for Moses to have done it, wouldn't it? Hi, my name's Moses. What would y'all like to do? But instead, he stepped up and he said, God has said. Now, nobody had to do it, but God has said. We need leaders like never before. We need all our pastors to be leaders within our churches. And we need the laity to go to those pastors and say, you're here to lead us. And we want you to lead us. And we will do our best to follow. As you, our spiritual leader, follow Christ, we want to follow you. And our pastors need that kind of undergirding from their laity. If the pastor says, well, you know, I don't want to jump out. Pastor, we want you to jump out. We want you to lead us. We need folks to lead us out of the mess that we have gotten ourselves in over the last 50 years. And let me tell you, being a pastor is one of the hardest things in the world to do. It is incredibly difficult to try to lead hundreds of volunteers to do something for Jesus, which oftentimes means you deny yourself. And that's their message. And they've got to have some people behind them saying, you preach it, you teach it, we've got your back. Because those backs can break, and loads are heavy. Pastors, we need you to stand up and say, I'm willing to carry the load. And you lay people need to get up and say, you ain't going to have to do it by yourself. But we can't stand still any longer. We can't afford to do that. No, not again. It is broke again. Well, I should have had this in paper, and then I could have just told you what the next line was, but I don't. This is really good, Jack. These slides and the coordination therefore brought to you by the Mid-Atlantic Foundation. Aha! We have failed to value and use worship appropriately. The best place in the world for us to reach our people and to reach the world is in worship. High quality, well done worship with excellence. And yet it amazes me the bad worship that I see as I go around. Talked with a preacher not too long ago, been to his church, and we were meeting together that night, and I said, well, I appreciated Sunday. I really didn't. I lied. And his words were, well, you know, there's just some Sundays you just blow it off. And I thought, what Sunday is that? What Sunday was it that God said, just blow this one off? There were several hundred people had gathered up there. It always struck me when I was a pastor. I mean, it was kind of awing when I would stand in that pulpit and look out there, and there were several hundred people, and they had all shut up and raised up their chins and were going to listen to whatever I had to say. Now, what an incredible privilege that is. And to be boring when you have that kind of opportunity is sinful. And not to give your best to God when these people said, I'm right here, let me hear it, is an absolute sin. And for time not to be spent to make music moving and inspiring and to give the people there something they can lean on and depend upon as they go out that next week. I don't get it. And yet it appears in too many places that worship was an afterthought that week. And we just can't have it. Worship is an incredible place for us to share how we're changing lives. There's nothing more important to the acquisition of funds than helping people understand we have impacted lives. And here's how we did it. And here's an example of it. And I'm going to bring Susan out to share it with you. And yet, how many of our churches hear an impactful statement of how a life was changed through their work in ministry? How many places does that happen? When we know that's the most important thing to make happen, to inspire people to want to give to us. Give me impact. Sunday morning is an incredible opportunity for us to do our work, our most important work. They're all there. You know, all the nonprofit leaders that I work with around the country, and I always say, you were a pastor. And I said, I was. And they said, God, you pastors blow it every week, and I just wish I had your opportunity. And I said, what are you talking about? You get all your donors together once a week. They're right there for you to impact them with what you're doing so that they'll give to you. And you guys blow it every week. Man, it's so hard for us to just reach our people with our message of what we're about. Oh, you guys get a shot every 7 days. We have to learn to use worship and to do it with a high degree of excellence. And folks, we got to quit focusing on membership and get back to focusing on discipleship. Now, I understand that the statistics I gave you and statistics we talk about say we have blank members, because you can count that. But we focus too much on a member and not on making a disciple of Jesus Christ. Members are cheap. Members are easy. And that's what we've done. I was asking a fellow the other day in a nonprofit board I was in, and somebody said something about this was a new member on the board, and they had introduced him, and they were kind of going around the room and said, you know, Clif's a Methodist preacher who's president of Horizon Stewardship. And the guy said, oh, I just became a Methodist. And I said, well, good. I'm glad you saw the light, brother. And I said, what led you to the Methodist church? He said, it was easier than where I was. Boy, that's the kind we want, isn't it? We want somebody who comes to us because it's easier. No. If you're not ready to pick up your cross, Jesus said. If you don't love me more than father, mother, sister, brother, I mean, there is nothing easy about Jesus' call to us. There is nothing in there where Jesus said, nah, don't worry about it. I'm trying to get at least 100 members, so sign up. It was tough. It was hard. That's what it was going to take to turn the world around and make the kingdom. And yet we focus so much on members. How many of our churches today are requiring people to go through classes of expectation to where we don't just share, well, here's the history of our church and when the buildings were built and a map of how to get around in it, etc. But here are the expectations of a disciple in our church. When we say prayers, presence, gifts, service, witness, here's exactly what we mean by that. And if you're not there yet, then you're not ready to be a disciple. And that means that you're not ready to join the church and be a member. Just keep visiting, be a part, we'll love you, be in worship. But this is a commitment of discipleship. It's not a club to belong to. The world no longer sees us as different. They don't see us as unique. They don't see the value. And some of it is we simply look like a collection of people that are very similar to Rotary or the Lions Club or others. We've got to get back to making disciples. And when we do, they're going to want to invest in our uniqueness for what we do. Will there be a few less people on the roll? Yes, there will. Because there will be those like the fellow I mentioned who want to go where it's easier. But you'll have more disciples for Christ, and your worship's going to go up. Participation's going to go up, and giving's going to go up, and your ability to change the world is going to go up. It's not going to happen with members. It's going to happen with disciples. That's one of the great struggles that I've got. I actually heard a preacher said a man came up to join the church. And the pastor shook hands. He introduced him. He shook his hand, and he said, now, we just have one question to ask you. You know, he put the just in it. I always think that's interesting. Just. Like, this is no big deal. We just have one question to ask you. And then he said, it's not hard. Will you be loyal? And you can see the guy sitting there going, you know, and the preacher says, your answer is, I will. I will. We're so glad to have you. He got a member, but he didn't make a disciple. And somewhere down the line, that guy's going to get fussed at because he's not tithing. And he's going to sit there and say, but nobody told me about that. Do you know what they say about tithing, by the way, in the confirmation literature of the United Methodist Church? Nothing. Do you know what they say about money and the need of it to give it in the section on gifts in the commitment piece? Nothing. Not one thing. Nothing. Now, it's real easy to fuss at the authors of Methodist curriculum. But what are we doing in our churches that makes sure they hear that from us and understand the expectations of being a disciple of Jesus and not just a member of the church? And lastly, and I'll toss this out, and then I'll get Jack to come up and ask the questions that he's got. In our churches, one of the reasons that we're failing is that we have not dealt well with debt principle. We have churches, Methodist churches all over America, drowning in a sea of debt from buildings that they have built. And they are trying to deal with payments and not with principle. Debt scares me to death because it is the one thing I have witnessed in my ministry that has the sole power to kill a church. You know, I've said to folks several times that, you know, I've seen some really bad pastors. Bad. You know, they wake up at 10, have coffee till 11, break at 12 for lunch, go home for a nap, see what Adam Hamilton preached last week and make sure that they get a copy of it so they can do it this week. Go home at 3. You know, they're bad. But, you know, we have a way of kind of moving them down the line, and the church recovers and goes on. I've seen some bad laity. Ooh, mean, vicious, spiteful, ugly. I mean, devil-like. Just stab you in the back. Do you in. I was a pastor long enough that I buried a bunch of those folks. And I had Guido shoot them first. But the church carried on. But I've seen good pastors and really good laity. And a church that was growing have to close its doors because on one night, in a spirit of excitement, they took on a debt that was 11 times their budget. And they could not afford it. And after years of trying, the church folded. And debt was the killer. Our churches need to get a handle on debt so we can focus on ministry. And I'll talk probably some more about that tomorrow, but that's one of the big reasons why money has so dominated what we're doing versus mission, because a debt load was so heavy that leadership felt they had no choice. So, Jack, come on up and ask your questions, or get them from the floor, or whatever.
We'll do a little of both, I think. We all know a lot of these issues that are facing us, and I think that what we always want to know is, how do we grow forward? How do we grow forward? Not just go forward. We want to grow, make disciples, and there's tools and techniques and opportunities that are before there. So Clif, give me a few of the top things that you're seeing happen in the churches that are capturing this, they understand it, and now they're moving and growing forward.
I'm asked just about every year by the new church planners, and I usually am asked to speak to them in their training sessions. If I was starting a church today, what's the one thing I would try to do? And the most important thing that I would try to do starting a church is to make sure it was a very high expectation church from the get-go. That we started that way and we stayed that way. And that people understood if they were going to come here, there was going to be a high degree of expectation of discipleship. That's not so easy to do when you've got a church that's 100 years old. To walk in there and, you know, decide next Sunday, I'm going to get up and tell them, okay, there's a new set of rules. Well, the new rule is you ain't going to be preacher there very long. It can be done, and frankly, it's where I think we need to go. But what you have to do is to start with a handful, a core of a half dozen. And you begin to get them as you study books and things about that. This is the way we need to be in training disciples. This is what we need to be saying to new members. And you get that core and you begin to spread it out till finally leadership's there, and they give you permission to train new members that way. And as those new members come in, their DNA will slowly be absorbed amongst the old. But you just can't get up, you know, I mean, Grandpa's going to be out there and said, you know, I know you said it's starting tomorrow, we got all tithe, but you know, I came in 1972 under the 2% clause, you know, and I'm grandfathered in. It won't work, but you can do it with your new people and begin to change it. And I think the other the thing that I certainly see, that our most successful churches, we don't go in there and find laity who don't know the mission, because it's plastered all over the place, and they're reminded about it constantly. And in their board meetings, you'll look at the heading on their board meeting, and it has the mission at the top of it. And the first order of business is not the treasurer's report that then would drive the rest of the business. That's the last report. And everybody who speaks is asked to relate what they want to do to the mission. You know, when Aunt Myrtle gets up and wants to paint the ladies' bathroom purple, and she's wailing away about it needs to be purple, the response is, Aunt Myrtle, this is great. Can you help us understand how if the ladies' bathroom is purple, that's going to enhance the mission? Because, Aunt Myrtle, it ain't about you. It's about the mission. Now, you don't say that last part. But that's where it all goes. Everything just gets pointed back. And I think that'll be some of the things that will lead us to some of the greatest change.
On the mission subject, let's stay there for a minute. If you have mission shift going on in the church, and a pastor starts to recognize mission shift, is there a real good way of getting back to the mission before it sort of shifts to the reality that is not perceived by all, to one reality for the congregation?
You know, I'm not sure if I don't get this right, phrase it again, Jack, but when I see mission shift, the simple shift is Jesus is no longer the mission, I'm a mission. I mean, that's what it is. It's usually not, you know, Jesus or, you know, something else out here. It's either Jesus or me. And that's what we have to guard against. It is, in too many of our churches, we have become the mission. And I think we'll always fight against that. I mean, you can't read the Bible without seeing that struggle going on. You know, things get going well, and okay, I think we can handle it by ourselves. We don't need God anymore, and then it goes badly. Okay, God, now we need you, and, you know, the judges are riding all that thing. So to guard against I becoming the mission, or me being the mission, I think in all of the ways we can in our worship service, it should be mentioned almost every Sunday in some way. The mission of our church is that it becomes ingrained, and that in all of our leadership meetings, it is there. And then we've got to be focused as a leadership group to keep going back there. Don't be afraid of someone threatening you with money to insist that whatever occurs goes back to the mission.
With that in mind, and the mission in mind, how do we go out and fund it? You talk a lot about the 3 pockets of giving, current tithes and offerings, capital campaigns, something that's going to be done while I'm a member here, and then legacy. How does tying that into the mission, how critical is that?
Well, I think it's critical. Every single church ought to be actively seeking gifts from all 3 pockets. Every year, all 3 pockets. Because people have the opportunity to give differently from all 3 pockets at different times. We simply tend not to ask. And what people want to see when they make those gifts is that my gift is going to have an impact. They want to understand the impact of that gift. So we help them understand the impact that it can have to give, and if they give more, the more impact will be there. You see, part of the uphill battle that we've got right now is that just like this past week when the Pew report came out, There's very little good news in that report about Christians in the church. I mean, it was pretty devastating that we've been at this and we're not winning people. We're losing people. So if you've got money to give, your question, why do I want to invest in that which looks like it's going to be a loser? You can't hang your hat on Christianity or the United Methodist Church. You got to hang your hat on our church is going to win people for Jesus, change lives right here, and it's a good place for you to invest. That you can affect, and it's got to have impact, and it's that impact that has to be shared with people that they understand it. Because, I mean, they're just being told almost daily in the news that the church is not a good place to go anymore.
With different styles of churches now coming on, and we're trying a lot of different things with worship, how does that still get funding for operations if they're not mission focused? Meaning that we're sort of taking it away from the traditional worship at 11. There's a lot of churches experimenting with different things. How do they get funded, or do they get funded the exact same way? Is there something they're doing that other churches just aren't?
Well, again, I'm not sure I followed the total question, but worship is a tool for us to be strengthened to do the mission. It's not just the fact that we had an hour and we called it worship, do we check it off? The idea is to do the mission, not to do worship in one certain way. How can we worship the Lord God Almighty, our Creator, our Savior, our God, in a way that enables us to do the mission? It always goes back to the mission. And I've been a bunch of, I grew up in traditional worship, and that's really where I go most of the time. On Sundays, I'll go to a traditional service. It's just kind of who I am. I'm 63. That's what I grew up with. And my wife also, she loves the organ, and so she wants that. But I go to a lot of contemporary, and I can tell you right now, if it's good, I can worship in either one very well. And either one can be effective to do the mission. It's just that in too many places, whether it's contemporary or traditional, it's just not good. And that's the problem. Either one will work to do the mission. Now, I don't think that God's sitting up there saying, don't bring the drum set out,
When we talk about tradition, it's tradition. There's a lot of churches where the pastor doesn't know what people give, and I know you're an advocate that
why you want to go there, Jack?
They should. Well, because I think I think the question is out there. Why don't you talk a couple of minutes about the pastor's need to know versus the congregation's need to not know or not know?
Y'all want to go there? Well, it's a little bit of what I'm going to do tomorrow night too, Bishop. So it'll just be a bigger group that'll get it. Yes, I'm a huge advocate that our pastors need to know. In Rich Church, Poor Church, I have a chapter that's called Knowing or Guessing, which is better. I was talking with our bishop in Arkansas a few weeks ago. He's talking to me about appointments, and one of the things they've done, they now have video of every full-time pastor preaching. And he said, we are ready to make an appointment. We don't guess anymore about whether he or she can preach. We put them on the screen, and I and the whole cabinet watch them do it. I said, oh, man. He said, and sure enough, we will have superintendents fight for somebody to go to a much larger spot and, oh, they're a great preacher. And in the past, we would have said, then let's send them to that great church that needs great preaching. He said, now we put it on the screen. Everybody looks at that DS and said, you call that good? I think that's great leadership of our bishop and cabinet to know what they can know instead of guessing. And I can't think of any place in leadership to where it's better to guess than to know. And yet, in too many places, we ask our pastors to lead us and to lead the church, the body of Christ, by guessing about something that is so critically important as the income into the church he or she is called to lead. That cannot in any way enhance leadership. It hurts it. You know, I hear stuff like giving is between the giver and God. Okay, that's not true. Somebody counts the money in every church in this conference. So you just blew that theory by 50%. It's the giver, God, and whoever counts it. Now, why does it make more sense for somebody who counts it to know versus the leader who's called to make decisions that are going to affect the future? Yeah, I do, and I'm getting there. You know, the other thing you hear, you got time? I'm standing up now.
Well, we do want to get to some other questions, but go to it. Yeah.
You open this can.
Well, I sort of saved my best question for last.
You open this can. The other thing that we hear is we want our pastor to treat everybody equally, right? How many of you pastors treat your members equally? Bishop, take names. Well, that's good. Why don't you treat them equally? Why? They're not equal. Gosh. You know, I'm just thinking how it would go with your staff parish committees if you said, I'm working hard to treat members equally. I don't want to know what anybody give. Oh, bless you, righteous preacher. And then they'd say, preacher, how's Jane doing at the hospital today? We know that she's just about gone. And the preacher says, well, I didn't check on Jane today. I went and sat down with Bill. He's getting ready to run a marathon, and I want to just visit with him before he does that. I saw Jane yesterday, so I shouldn't go see her today. That wouldn't be equal. I imagine your folks say, preacher, Jane is sick. You know she's sick, and you need to make a decision, preacher, that you should be with Jane. You shouldn't be with Bill, the marathon runner. You get Joe up there to the hospital. Right? Well, you don't have that visit because most all of our pastors wisely and appropriately make those kind of decisions. Waking up every day saying, from what I know, I'm going to choose where it is that I think God most wants me to be today as His representative with the people I'm charged to serve. And today I'm going to read Scripture to one member and one member only, and it's going to be Jane. And today I'm going to hold the hand of only one member, and it's going to be Jane. And today I'm going to only pray with one member, it's going to be Jane, because today may be Jane's last day. And that's where God would want me to be. And that ain't treating them equal, that's just treating them right. And that's doing what they need to have done. Now, when we know how a person gives, it can give us incredible insight into the spiritual health of that person. I don't believe that you can love Jesus Christ and not give. I don't think you can do it. If Jesus Christ has your heart, you give. So if I am looking at a sheet and it says that Bill Jones, who is the CEO of ABC Corporation, gave to my church $50 last year, am I greatly worried that I need to go get more money out of Bill? Or am I saying Bill does not have the relationship with Jesus Christ Bill should have, and as the spiritual physician charged with his spiritual health, I need to intercede with Bill on behalf of his soul? And I think that because of what I have seen. Giving gives us a glimpse into the soul. And every pastor should put a pastor's heart and awareness into that knowledge, just as you would if you looked over an attendance sheet. And you said, Bill Jones hadn't been in worship all year. Now I got to decide, does he love Jesus or not? He's healthy and able, and I see him playing golf twice a week. I bet you he doesn't know Jesus. I should relate to Bill in one sort of way. Versus Bill Jones is a school teacher, and I see him in worship, and I've noted that Bill Jones gives $4,500 a year to the operating budget. I'll bet you that's a tithe. That's telling me this may be a person I should have on my stewardship committee in finance, leading and guiding other people to know Jesus like he does. And yet in too many places, we would pick the other guy because he's the CEO of some corporation, and we'd leave the school teacher off. One of them knows money, the other one knows Jesus. I just can't think of a reason why it's a good idea not to know. I cannot think of a reason. You know, and I know there's some good pastors who say, well, it's my decision. I have chosen not to know. And when I ask them why, well, I'm afraid it'll influence how I treat them. And I don't want to be so tempted. I don't believe you're that bad a pastor. Really? Really? Then you'd better put a note outside on the door. If you've committed adultery, don't tell me about it. If you went to the casino, don't tell me about it. You've been drinking too much, too long, too hard. Don't tell me about, do not tell me about stuff that may not reflect well on you. If that's how you feel, you shouldn't be a pastor. And you know that. You know that. We have succumbed to that first thing, I believe, too many of us as pastors have. We have subordinated the mission to money. Because we know that when we talk about money, when we seek to lead people away from that to mission, when we seek to get them to give up that which they love more than God, they get mad at us. And they fuss. And they grumble. And we get scared. And we think a good, safe way not to get fussed at is just don't go there. Folks, where we're not going is the source of their sin. And we're supposed to be in the sin business. And we're supposed to be against it. So, did I answer your question?
Well, I think you started. I know some other folks have a question, and nobody left, either clergy or laity left during that period of time. So I guess we're on target.
Well, they're polite.
Well, we're going to give them a chance right now to say how they feel. Microphone number 1 and microphone number 2 are both hot mics. You can go up there and ask your question, and Clif will answer it. We're going to do this for about 20 minutes or so, and we got somebody at microphone number 1.
I do beg your pardon. Given the change in our cultural landscape, given the rise of the nuns, given postmodern thinking, given millennial attitudes towards religion and Christianity, what would you look at as more effective stewardship models than what we largely have been talking about, if I may ask?
What would I look at as better stewardship models? Different stewardship models. I think we have to take note of the fact that for now nearly 40 years, gifts to religion have declined. People are giving less. They're saying loudly, you're not impacting me. There are areas that are, and religion is the one that's not. What I have called for is that we need to learn what drives gifts. And that's a lot of what I talk about and what I write about. And there's 3 things that we know that Americans say drive my giving. It's a belief in the mission. We talked about it. They want to have impact in the mission. They want to give towards something that produces results. Most major donors today that I talk to will not talk about a gift. They will talk about an investment. I'm going to make an investment in this. They used to call it a charitable donation. Now they're saying it's an investment. And what do we want from our investment? We want it to bring a return. And that's what we haven't talked about. Here's the return you're getting for your investment. Secondly, they're saying, I'm going to give where I have a high respect for leadership within that organization. The leadership of the organization is the second most important thing. Who's the primary leader within the church? Pastor is. Well, you know, the pastor has the ability, more than any single person, to drive change for good or for bad, to affect it. And yet in too many of our churches, we have kept the pastor separated and almost encouraged separation from persons who frankly could help fund that mission. And one of the ways is what I just finished talking about. You know, we've said you're not supposed to know. You know. And well, I heard the word Jesus over here a minute ago, right? It's a good name. It's a good name. And well, this may not be what you were saying, but I had a church leader say one time, no, people don't give in response to the pastor they just give to Jesus at the church. That's not true. It's not true. They will give if they believe that the person they can see is doing the job for Jesus, well or not. You know, that's what, when you give, people give to the university because they have confidence the president can take the gift and apply it in ways they want it done. So, and then the third chief reason is fiscal responsibility, is what people say. I give to where I think my money will be well used. And we still in the church have the belief that if we tell them how poor and broke we always are, the more they'll give to us. And what that does is the exact opposite of drive gifts our way. We're the only ones. I mean, we have churches that still think it's a brilliant idea to put it in the bulletin how broke you are. That's just insanity. It's not helpful. Yes, sir.
Comment and a question. I encourage you not to back down from this tomorrow. That's number one, so that's an encouragement.
Well, thank you.
We'll be praying for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have a top 10 list of reasons why clergy don't preach about tithing?
I don't know if I got a top 10, but I think I can tell you. And understand, for 20 years, I was up there deciding whether I was going to preach about it, or not. After a year or two in the pulpit, they kind of figured out he's just going to do it anyway. It is the most controversial thing that we talk, not just tithe, but money in general. When we get into money, people get uneasy, and many times they get angry, they get upset, and they will let us know, and they'll let others know. And so we understand we're walking on thin ice. The reason the ice is thin is that you are talking about the primary sin within your congregation. That's why they don't like it. That's why they don't like it. You have touched where they are, and they don't want you to go there. And that's why I think they make those rules, that we shouldn't know and this or that. It is a sin in their life that they love money more than God, and they don't want the preacher to be aware of it, and they don't want the preacher to talk about it. And they will try to keep their sin in the dark as long as they can. Same reason an alcoholic, hides the bottles here and hides them up there. I don't want it to be out in the open. I'm going to hide it. And if you confront the alcoholic, do they say, oh, thank you so much for coming and talking to me about this problem in my life. I'm so grateful. Is that how they respond? They're angry. They are angry. How dare you? You know. And yet if you love them, you will try to separate them from that bottle because you understand that bottle is going to ruin their life. And if you really love your people, you will try to separate them from what they love more than God. And with most of your folks, it's not a bottle, and it's not gambling, and it's not adulterous relationships. It's money. That's what they love the most. So I think that's why. It takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage. But it can work.
So you talk about mission being one of the primary focuses here. So I know you worked with tons of churches. Can you give me some good, short mission statements that you've run into? The churches like, they've got it. This is a growing church. Everybody's got the mission down. No, we know it's make more disciples for Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world.
Sounds good.
But is there a tight one that everybody in the pews in a church that you've worked with or has it been just working off of that?
Look, I've seen lots of different ones, and there are some very successful churches that have them. But I don't know of one any better than what the United Methodist statement of supposed to be mission of our church. We're to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. I think sometimes we flip that around. And we've said, we're going to transform the world, and we hope a disciple shows up. We need to help people claim Jesus Christ is Lord of their life. Now that He's Lord of your life, let us now go out as a mighty army for God, and we're going to transform and change this world as Christ, would have us do. There's not a better one. And I think if you took that in your local church and you put that as your heading and you talked about it and said, it's not hard to come back and say, let's get our education report and talk about how's that making disciples. Let's get the report from trustees. You all want to build this and do that. That sounds fun. How's that going to help us make disciples? You're talking about we need to pave the parking lot. Do we really? Will we make more disciples if we pave the parking lot? Maybe you will, but that needs to be the question. You don't pave it because, it's kind of ugly. Well, does it being ugly keep people from coming? I mean, Walmart would say that it does. Parking lots are very important to their business. But we need to always go back to that. And too often it's, paving a parking lot's good. Treasurer, what kind of money do we have? And that drives the discussion. Will the parking lot make disciples? You want to hire somebody? Hiring people to me was always easy. We're going to hire a youth director. It will not be hard to measure. Let's see how many more disciples for Christ come out of the youth department. We can count this. And so I like our Methodist mission as good as any, Frank.
If you will shift for a minute about capital campaigns and things where we're funding a mission and capital within the building, then it sounds almost maybe counterproductive that if we're going to do a capital campaign, what should the capital campaign focus on to have the most success? Or how would you articulate a capital campaign?
Well, the biggest reason why we would tell a church, and we tell them every year, you're not ready to do a capital campaign, is that you don't have a vision for how that capital campaign is to fulfill the mission. We want to build a great hall. Why? Well, the Baptists did, and it looks really nice down there. And our people want one too. Well, we all want to eat in the same place. And, these are nice things, but how does it relate to what God wants you to be about? How does it get back to your mission? The number one component to making a capital campaign successful is when you can look at your people and say, we cannot fulfill our mission without this. And if we do have this, then you will see the impact and the results. We will be able to greater do the mission. I'm from Arkansas, so it's real easy for me to keep referencing Walmart. But, they own our state. So we see them, everywhere. But it's amazing. They all know their mission. You talk to any guy wearing a little old blue vest, and they know the mission, of Walmart. And when you talk to Walmart about why didn't you do this with the building or that, because that won't make us one more dollar. It will not make us one more dollar, so we're not going to spend that dollar. We shouldn't spend a dollar that's not going to help us make greater disciples. You know, one of the ratios I really love to do, I love to take church budgets and divide it by the numbers of professions of faith they have. Here's what a convert cost you this year. It's amazing. Churches, golly, $462,000 per convert. Is that well spent? Was that good? Could you not have brought someone to Jesus more efficiently than spending $462,000? Of course, some people are dividing their budget by 0 because they don't have any professions of faith. But what's the mission? Did our money go for the mission? So I think that's primary. As I like to say to people, capital campaigns are born on your knees. They're not born on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. We need to be praying about what God wants us to do. And then that's where then you go and ask your people to fund it.
Probably the biggest fear most churches have or most pastors have surrounds legacy or death and dying issues. Why don't we conclude tonight with talking a little bit about legacy planning, and gifts that live beyond the individual?
I am a huge proponent of planned gifts and estate gifts in the life of the church. And I talk a lot about it because though we are still America's favorite charity, getting 31 cents out of every dollar, we only get about 8 cents when it comes to bequest gifts. We rank 5th. 5th. America's favorite charity ranks 5th. And some of you have got an awful lot of folks who've been in your pews who have died, and you have said, golly, I thought we were going to get something from Uncle Harry. Well, somebody probably did, and it wasn't you. Why wasn't it you? Because you didn't ask for it. And they don't think about us. And you heard me say how passionate I am about this. Nobody has a higher mission than we do. There's not a mission on the planet higher than ours. The world needs Jesus Christ more than it needs anything else. And yet we don't ask our people to help fund that with a gift and a bequest. So I've been trying to get more and more of our churches, to do it. And, one of the things I've done in seminars, and some of you probably heard me do it, I said, take the number of deaths you had in your church the past year and then multiply that by $50,000. And that would probably equal what a tithe would be of the estates of every one of those people who died if they simply left you a tithe. If you had 10 deaths last year, it's $500,000. If you had 20, that's $1 million. And all you did was a funeral. Many of those people are going to leave those gifts to somebody else because that somebody else asked them for it. And we've got to get there. So, you got a question?
We have another question.
It's good because Jack said we're going to end on death and dying. And
Well, it's kind of related to that. I just serve small churches, and it's kind of like they're real happy to live off those that have died and left them some money that they whittled down and whittled down and whittled down. And I hear you're saying, go get more dead people's money.
Yes.
And how do we keep from doing that?
Did you also hear me say something about mission?
Yeah. So we
So the problem in this church, and I don't know your church, and so I hate to kind of reference it, but you said you see them just wanting to use, dead Aunt Hazel's money, and they haven't become stewards themselves because of it. Yes. The problem in that church is that back when Aunt Hazel died, nobody established an endowment policy that controlled the use of those funds. And those funds are then wide open to pay the preacher's salary, pay the light bill, or whatever else. And there should be a policy statement in all of our churches, and you can get one at the Mid-Atlantic Foundation that will say that at no time may the principal or the interest thereof be used for that which should be paid and is normally paid for through the operating budget of our church.
So then when the church dies, what happens to that money?
So when that person dies...
No, the church. We're talking about little churches.
Oh,
not
when the
these-
church itself dies and
Yes.
it has this money set aside,
Yep.
policy controls that too. That money then goes into the annual conference. It can go directly to, it can go wherever the policy states. It can go to the foundation. It can continue to serve the United Methodist Church's ministry.
Okay.
But the policy would control that.
Yeah, the
'Cause
legacy lives on.
I've had people ask me this question. I have money to give to that church. This lady's dying, and she says, do you think the church will survive, that I can actually help my church with this
My
gift?
answer to her is the church will live on forever. This building may cease to be here.
That's right.
The church will live on, and that money will live on forever, funding the church, which is the people of Christ seeking to do ministry on his behalf. That's where that money will go, and that's what the policy states.
I told her to give it to Jesus, and if she thought that church was a place that Jesus would receive it, go ahead and give it.
But
let
what,
that be.
what you need, you're the pastor there?
Yeah, for a couple days.
Well, act
yeah.
a little more excited about it.
You know those folks that you buried to get, you missed a couple. Those mean ones in the church, okay? They all got together in some certain areas.
All right, I hear you've got a couple of free agents. You want some other pastor to sign up before you leave here and take care. Okay, but that church
Take 'em out.
simply needs to be, they need an endowment policy now. Now.
I will
And
suggest that before I
And
leave.
folks like Jack and Frank, I mean, they can help you do that. It's really not very hard, but that stops that. Now, they may be so ingrained in bad habits at this point, but that's how you stop it. And some of you pastors and laity, listen to her. Don't get your policy after you've had the bequest. Get your policy before it comes, and you won't ever go there.
Well, I suggested to this church after I heard you speak earlier in an event at in this annual conference that has a wonderful idea and what you provided, and I was pretty much put in my place.
Yeah, that happens.
They don't want anybody to have any control other than themselves. Bringing another organization like that in takes that control away.
Right.
And so it's kind of like the church boss is in charge, and
I know.
it's sick.
It's hard.
Yeah, and it's hard.
It's hard, and I know you're the only church that Bishop Johnson has that's like that.
I can
where
imagine.
they put themselves first.
Well, what is looking at it from
It's
that?
tough, and it's tough. Look, it's hard on you as a pastor. Look, I
Oh,
know it
yeah.
is, and I commend you that you're staying in there, and somebody's probably going to follow you in there, and they're going to try too.
What would you suggest, like in light of this, for us? We have continuing education that we're required to get. It would be helpful if we could get some that would help with this, that we would have better tools to be able to work in these situations where you talk about the Word of God, and it's tough, and you talk about tithing, and you're right. People won't, they'll tell you, you talk like that again, I'm not coming to church.
Yeah, I know.
So are there tools? I mean, prayer, they're the basics of our faith, but are there things that teach better ways to do that? I don't know everything. I'm trying to do the best I can. What can I learn to get better with what I have to handle these things better? Because as long as I keep going to these small churches, there's a reason they're small.
Could I get you to do something?
Maybe, depends on what it is. I don't
If I
ever
give you
agree.
my card when we're done, would you send me your email address and let me correspond with you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank
We'll do
you.
that, okay?
Thank
I'd be
you.
happy to do that. You know, I appreciate her sharing, and, this highlights where it is with us. When Jesus said you got to pick up the cross, he made it really pretty clear that this is not an easy road. And sometimes I think in ministry we've tried to look for how can we make it easier. It's not going to get easier. If we're doing the work, it's going to be difficult work. And sometimes you dust your feet off and you go to the next group, and you try there. But there's not a pastor in this room that doesn't hear what you're saying to one degree or another. We've all had them. All had them. Okay.
Well, our time's getting a little bit long here, so I think we'll conclude for the evening. I certainly want to thank our board members for supporting bringing Clif to this annual conference and helping to fund this. Steve Morton, Kent Kraler, our chair of stewardship, they'll be around for a while if you have any questions about the foundation and what we're doing. Frank and the staff at the Mid-Atlantic Foundation that works so hard in trying to put stewardship first in all the churches. And certainly want to thank Clif for taking us a little further down the road in our stewardship journey as we get ready to launch into this annual conference. I hope you all keep stewardship number one in your hearts during the annual conference meeting, and it's certainly going to help us as we lead the church on forward as well. So until tomorrow night, thank you, Clif, and we'll see you tomorrow night.